So I've written down the answers on the quiz. If you have any question, you can ask me. But I don't think there's any question that I feel I should really have to go over unless you have a specific question about it. Okay, I guess not. So I think that people did better on this quiz than the previous one. And if you don't have any questions, I'm going to start with the lecture. So we have, just one second. Okay, so we were talking about ER models in the last class. And so this is the modeling that's the very first stage when you try to design a database system for any corporation. The first thing you have to do is to create a model. I mean, you have to find out what are the tables, what are the attributes and things like that. So you start by talking to the end users, and then you create a model. And it could be either a UML model or an ER model. But the thing is, these are all graphical models. And the reason that they're graphical is because when you are trying to finalize on the design, you have to interact with an end user who is often not, in a computer scientist. So you have to build a design that they can understand. But at the same time, the design should be formal enough that the designers are able to develop the database starting from there. So that's what ER models are. There are two of them. There are classes and then there are associations. So I'm going to start with classes. Another word for classes is really, because you're talking about ER models, they're really entities. And we'll start with the employee entity for the company database. So the employee, so an entity, so E1 is an employee, and the employee has certain attributes. So that's what this is. So you have the entity here, and these are the attributes. So you can visualize the employee entity as it's a table, but it's from a graphical visualization. So we see it as so many employees. So each employee is a entity with attributes. So, and relational databases are sets. So it's a table, but it's a set instance. Okay, and then when you look at the attributes, there are different types of attributes. I mean, out here, I've written down all the attribute names and things like that, but there are different types of attributes. So we have so all the attributes that I've shown out here, they're all simple, like name. But remember, if you recall, something like name in the company database is really split up into first name, middle name, and last name. So you can have simple versus composite attributes. So a simple attribute is John. And a composite attribute would be with first name, middle initial, and last name. So it would be John A. Smith. Then with attributes, they could also be multi-valued or single-valued attributes. So single-valued, for example, if you only have a single phone number, versus multi-valued could be you have a phone number at work, your phone number at home, you have a cell phone number. So those are multi-valued. And if you've looked at the first normal form in relational databases, whenever you have multi-valued attributes, you have to bring them down to single-valued attributes. That's really what first normal form is actually. And then you have attributes that are stored versus derived. So for example, you could either say that John is 40, or you could derive the age from the birth date. So you could either store age explicitly or you could store it implicitly. And then of course we have attributes that could be null, and we've seen this before. So these are the different attribute types. So now I'm going to look at entities for the company database. So after talking to the end users, then it's the job of the designer to figure out what are the entities in the system that you are trying to build, the database system that you're trying to build. So for the company database, if you look at it, employee is definitely an entity out there, but you also have department, and somehow employee and department are not the same thing, they're different. So you say, you know what, so I have an entity called department. And then you have projects. So the thing is, do you combine projects and department together? That could be one entity. But so these are all really design choices that the system designers build. So they say, no, I think we should put project as a separate entity. So we have employee, project, and department. So all of these, are, like I mentioned, these are all a design. When you design a database, you kind of figure this out. So for example, when you design, if you said, okay, you know what, I'm going to have department and projects together as one entity, that's okay too. The final design that you build is going to the final database, I mean, the tables and all that will come out is going to start up from this initial design. If the initial design is not very good, then the final out, what comes out of it, what they say, what goes in is what comes out. So if your initial design is not that good, then the end product is not going to be that great, because you really want to come up with a database finally that is easy to maintain, easy to write queries for. So if you come up with a poor design, the end product is usually not going to be good. So anyway, so a good design may be to split, look at it and say, what, project is separate. Then another one, I have the company, this is let me just, now if you look at the company again out here, there is also something that dependent, which is a separate table out here. So that's another thing you figure out, what, we have dependents. Do we link them all up in the employee? Which is also a possibility. You could have employee and dependent as one entity, but you might say, you know what, I think that I'm going to have dependent as a separate entity. So again, it's a design choice. So if you go back to the company database, so the design that we are going to start up with is that we have these four entities: the employee, the department, the projects, and the dependents. So let's say that, the designer for the company database, they came up with these four entities in the beginning. So we're going to now look at each of these entities, and I'm going to start with the department entity, not the employee entity, because employee is a bit more complicated than the department one. So I'm going to start up with the department entity. So we have Okay, so this the ER diagram when we are making. So again, we're going to somehow, you must, when I briefly brought this up out here, this is the final ER diagram for the company database. So really what I'm going to do in this lecture and maybe Monday's lecture is, if I don't finish it today, is to build at the end of the lecture or a couple of lectures, you will be able to see how this diagram comes up, because this is the ER diagram that really one talks to with the end users. I mean, this is the design that, and from this design you really finally come up with the tables and stuff like that. Okay, so let's look at the department entity. So we have, it's a box. So you write the department name and it's in a box. So this is the entity name, and then you attach all the attributes to this entity. So for department, you have a department name. So we have then we have a department number. When you talk to the employees, you say, you know what, every department has a number associated with it. So we have a number. Then for a department also has locations. And then when you talk, one department could be in multiple locations. So we have, since a department could be in multiple locations, so it's a multi-valued. So this is a, so when you have a multi-valued attribute, when you have multiple values, you put them in a double circle. So that's what the double circle is. Well, on the other hand, D number and D name has to be single. And then you say, okay, a department also has a manager. Every department has a manager. So we have to attach the manager also to the department. So we have, okay. So then we have, let me just attach this to the, when you're talking also to the company database employees trying to figure out the design, they also tell you that the department number is unique. So every department, you can never have two departments the same number. And then they say the same thing about department name, that you can never have two departments with the same name. So then we say, okay, these are the keys. So therefore you underline them. So you underline every candidate key in the diagram. So in this case, what this is saying is that both D name and D number are keys. So I just want to specify that you should underline all candidate keys. Okay.
Are you actually able to distinguish that? Because like say D number and manager was also a potential key, then you'd have three underlined and no way of knowing how they're related.
Yeah, so you don't get to that part at this point in the diagram, you build it slowly.
Okay.
So this is all you know is that either unique and so manager. So that's another thing what he said, like if the manager was unique. So if you recall for department, and we'll do later, managers are not really unique. You could have one person managing two departments. So manager is not a key actually at this point. So that's why I'm not underlining it right now. But there's something else about manager. So when you write manager, so if you notice, a manager is also an employee. So this is the link out here with manager. Manager is also an employee. So this is and so this is a kind of what you call a link between department and employee. So I'm going to write at this point, I'm just going to highlight this. I'm going to, because this is a special, I'm coloring it to really show the connection that this attribute is slightly different from all the other three attributes, in the sense that manager is also an employee. So that's how I'm going to do it. And then there's another attribute in the department. When you talk, you also find that when you have a manager, there's also something called when did the manager start in the department? When did he become a manager? So again, so this is again another attribute that is there. But so this is one of those attributes, it's linked to the manager, but the manager is sort of linked to the employee table. So I'm going to attach this last attribute not to department, but I'm going to attach it to the manager. So, and some of these things, it is going to look a bit puzzling right now. It'll get clearer as I keep doing entity diagrams. So we have this attribute called manager start date. Oh. And that is linked to manager. So it's not linked to the department. I've linked it to manager because I'm not exactly sure. So, and remember, when you start ER diagrams, they get messed up and they may not all work out exactly like that. But so that's the reasoning that I'm using out here, is that manager start date, yes, it's part of the department, but it's also really connected to the manager, and manager is linked to employee. So I'm not really sure where to put it. So I'm going to connect it to manager. So that's the logical reasoning that I'm doing right now. So this is the department tab entity, and I want to just go to the diagram for a moment. So let me just pull that up, the diagram. Oh, so just think it's gone crazy. Okay. Okay, so we have, so this is the part that I'm doing right now, this department out here. Oh. So out here we have the name, the number, so that's a department name. You have the department number, and we have the location. So I don't have right now I don't have the manager start date in there, but that's okay. I've kept it out here. So that's where we are right now. So now let's look at the next one. So that was, I just close this. Okay. So now let's look at the project. So we have, actually, I want to do this. So we're looking at the next entity, the project entity. So we again have to put it in a box in the middle. So we have okay. So then again, we have project name and we have project number. So I'm just going to do that. So we have P number. Let me do it in a different color. And we have P name. So we have these two entities. And again, you're told that P name and P number are unique. So I'm going to underline them. So you're told that no two projects can have the same name. No two projects can have the same name. So you know that these are unique. And then there's, of course, location. So we have and a project, you're told, can only be in one place. So I don't know where that goes. So you know that a project cannot be in multiple, so you don't have to do the multi-valued. So let me just connect these to the project. But then you're also told that every project is controlled by some department. You can never have a project that is just floating in there, which is not connected to a department. Every project has a controlling department. So now again, you have this kind of quandary, you know, like what do I do? Because department is really the department entity. So again, I'm going to put it out here. So we have the controlling department. And I'm going to highlight, because this is again something we'll have to, because this is again linked to the department entities. So this attribute, it's an attribute of the project table, but it is really another connected to the department entity. So that's the project. So, okay, so then now let's look at the employee. So now that I've done department and project, and which are the two simpler entities, I'm going to look at the employee entity. And again, please jump in if you have any questions. Okay, so this employee is got a lot more fields in there. So I'm going to I'm just making a wider box because it's got a whole bunch of fields in there. Okay, so then of course, we know about the employee. The employee has the social security number. So we have SSN, and we know that SSN is a key. But you're also told out here that, you know what, in our company, the names are also unique. Okay, so name is also a key. So we have So you're told that name is unique, but you're also told that name is not a single valued attribute. It is a multi-valued attribute. It has this first name, last name, and middle initials. So those you attach to the and these get attached to the name. So really name is a multi-valued attributes with first name, middle name, and last initial. And then we want date is there. So we have birth date. So what they say is that, you know, we also use age a lot, but so that's where age is also attached, but age is a derived attribute. So I'm going to so you have birth date, but you have age. And I'm going to connect age to birth date because it's kind of derived from birth date. So it's not really it's not there. You could also connect it to employee. I'm just going to connect it to birth date since it shows a connection more clearly. So I do want to write out there, this is a derived attribute. Okay, and then you have all these, I think we had, yes, every employee works for a department. So again, we are going to have that orange colored. Because this is really connected to the department table. So and then we have okay, then we have a few small ones like sex, address. Let me see, we had salary. Yes, I forgot about salary. So we have okay, so we have all of that, but we also have that every employee also kind of works on projects. So we need to put all the projects that the employee works on, because that information is also very much part of an employee's information. So again, out here, I'm going to put that out here because, and you're going to have, an employee could work on multiple projects. So this is a multi-valued attribute. So we have works on for the projects that he works on. So we have, and this is again connected to projects. I'm going to color this. Anything that is sort of connected to another table, you have to put this through. So we have works on project, and to works on, you have the project that he works on. Okay, so that's, and then he works on a project for several hours. So okay, so this is the employee table. There's another, if you remember, every employee also has dependents. But right up front, when we started this up, I did say that we were going to put dependents as a separate entity. So again, this is a design choice. If you had not put dependents as a separate entity in that initial diagram, then you would have had to add dependents onto this employee table, I mean, this employee box. But because I have initially marked out dependents separately, I'm not doing so. So that was a design choice. And if I had attached employee, just like I've done works on, to the employee table, you know, would it make a difference? It might, it may not. It may have made a difference to the final design you came up with, or it may not have. And the same thing when I talk about works on. What if I had decided to label works on as a completely separate entity? Would it have made a difference? It may do, it may not do. We don't know that right now. So the whole idea is that some of the way the ER diagram is done is really not set in stone. Two different people could come up with two very good designs. It doesn't mean that one design is better. You both could come up with designs which are equally good, and they could be very, they could be different in that regard. The whole idea is that at the end, the tables that you generate, are they are they easy to manage? Are the queries easy to write? Those are the things that have, does it take up a lot of storage? Things like that. So these are the three entities that I have so far. Does anyone have any questions? Again, if you look at the table, I just want to go back up here. So these are the ones I've done so far. I've done the department, I've done project, and I've done employee. Okay, so you don't see works on attached so much out here, but it's coming out here. So right now, I just want to show that we'll eventually get to that table. So I just want to get through here. Okay, so now let's look at the fourth entity, which is dependent. So which like I said, I decided right up front, I'm going to have a fourth entity called dependent. I'm not attaching it to the employee. So we have dependent. So okay, so dependent has a name, So we have um, okay, so we have name, and then you have a dependent is born on certain days, so their birth date is there. Then you have the sex of the dependent. And a dependent is always connected to an employee. So we have the employee that he's, because you can't have a dependent without an employee. So a dependent is connected to um, an employee. So we have that out here. And again, the employee is connected to the employee table. So we're going to have to. Okay. So now the thing is, if you look at this table, we have the name too. All of this is great, but what is missing in the dependent table that is there in all the other three tables? Do you see anything that's kind of missing in this table that the other three tables have, but this table does not have?
No key yet.
That's right. That's the thing with the dependent. I haven't underlined anything because the names are not really unique. You could have both. John could have a dependent called Sally, and so could Mary have a dependent called Sally. So that's the thing with the dependent, is that you don't really have any key. So this is called. So this. Let me. So this is called a weak entity type. In comparison to all the others, which are called strong entities, this is a weak entity because it has no key. All the others have keys. So that's the employee. Department and project. They all have keys. So they're all strong entities, but dependent is a weak entity. So how you show this in the diagram is by you put a double box, so that when the entity itself is in a double box, that means it's a weak entity. So that's why there's this double box out there. And then you underline. So, and the thing is, what this means is that in order for this entity to have a key, it has to be connected to a controlling entity, which in this case is the employee. I didn't want to call the employee the controlling employee like I did for the, for the project. I called the project, I said that this was a controlling department, but in many ways, at least project has its own unique key. But in a dependent only becomes unique when you connect the dependent with the controlling entity, in this case, which is the employee. So the key for this, so the key for dependent is only there if you can connect it to another entity. So it by itself, it does not have a key. So any questions? Did you get this so far? So all the others that we did were strong entities, except for the dependent. So let me just go back to the diagram again. So we have, so if you look out here, dependent has the double box out here, and that's to show that it's a and name is, so when you underline the name out here, it's underlined with this, with a hash line, not with a complete line. So that kind of shows that it is a weak entity. And if you look in this diagram, it's kind of connected to the employee out here. So, okay, so I'll just go back. I'm going to okay, so now we have 4 tables, but if you remember, our company database had, I think, 7 or 8 tables. I don't remember exactly, but it was either 7 or 8. So we have a few more tables, so we still have a way to go. So now let's look at the second part of when we started the ER diagram. We said that we have associations too, which are interconnected tables. So you have the entities, and then you have the associations. So now we're going to look at the associations or the relationships. And you can call them anything. So these are the ones that they, they show the link between 2 tables or 2 entities. Okay. So now I'm going to start talking about the constraints. So let's, again, I'm sorry I have to keep going back and forth. So let's look at the employee. Okay, so we do have in this table, we have an employee. So let's look at this employee and the department. So we are told that every employee works for a department. So these are the constraints they're told right up front. So let me write down some of the constraints, and some of which I captured in the earlier diagram. So the constraints are, so I'm told that every employee, and this is again stuff that I get when I talk to the employees of company database. So so they tell me that every employee must work for one and only one department. So this is a constraint that they tell upfront that, you can't have an employee who is not connected to any department. And you cannot have an employee that's connected to more than one department. So every employee must work for one and only one department. And then you're told a second constraint. And the second constraint is that, you can not have a department which has no employees. In fact, every department must have a minimum of 2 employees. So this is another constraint. You said you are not going to build a department unless they have at least 2 employees in the department. So I have the second constraint is every department must have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of some number n. So let me just say n greater than equal to 2 employees. So I'm going to write n. They may say that every department cannot grow beyond 1,000 employees, let's say. So they give you some kind of, so n could be a number like 1,000. So all of these constraints that they're saying, you want to put them in the ER diagram, because this is something that, these are very important. They have to be enforced in the database that you build finally. So somewhere they should be in the DDL, the data definition language. This should not be something that's left to a programmer, nor should it be something where you could have a data entry error. These constraints, I mean, when you're talking, they say these constraints are really important. They have to be there in the structure of the database. Okay, so we have to put that in. So I'm going to show how to put that into the diagram. So So we have, so this is how you do it in the diagram. So let's, so we have, so you, again, you put the entity as a box. So you have every employee. So this is really connecting two employee. Yeah, this is connecting two different tables, the employee table and the department table. So we have the department on the side. Okay, so you show the connection between the two using the diamond. So we have works for. Okay, so this is trying to show the connection between the employee and the department, and we want to put the constraint in. So the constraint you put in by the connection between the two. So we have okay, and then you put down the connection between that. So the one was, it was told that every employee must work for one, at most one. So the one here, this is the first one, this is the minimum. And this is the maximum. So this one states that every employee must work for a minimum of one and a maximum of one. So at most one and at least one. And then you have on the other side, it's a minimum of 2 and a maximum of n. So this is, so this kind of captures everything that you have in the constraints has been stated, is being captured in this diagram. Okay, so do you understand the diagram and how I captured the information of the constraints into the diagram? So if you know how to read an ER diagram, you can look at the diagram and immediately figure out these two constraints. Okay, so this states that every employee must work for a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 1. And every department must have a minimum of 2 and a maximum of n employees. There's one more thing about the diagram, by the way, and that is that in a diagram, if you want to show that, you use a double line. So a double line is a way of showing that every employee, every member of the employee entity must be connected to the department. So you cannot have even a single employee who does not have a department. So yes, you can also see that by the minimum of 1 and maximum of 1. You don't, this double line, this double green line is not really necessary. It's an extraneous thing. But I do want to say that sometimes it's, because diagrams are a way that you kind of try to understand stuff. So, even if you miss the minimum and maximum, hopefully you won't miss the double line out here, the fact that there are 2 lines. So that kind of tells you that it's a total participation. That's what the double line means. So I want. So every entity, member of the employee entity participates. So okay. So that's a workflow. Let me just go and look at the diagram up here. Let's see. Yeah, so this is where I am on the works for part. So So in the textbook, they don't show the minimum and maximum. Actually, they're just putting one number there, but they do have the double line. So if you look out here, there's a double line that shows the total part. That's why I said I want to show everything, because sometimes, they don't really give you the minimum number. So here they haven't given you the minimum number. So that's why you have this double line. Another thing, if you look out here, if you notice out here, it's an N. But remember when I was doing it, I said that out here, it's a 1:1. And out here, it was 2:n. So maybe this, when I said minimum of 2, I guess it could have been 1. But anyway, it was 2:n out here. But here you have N and you have 1 out here. So how did that come about? So So in the diagram, I just want to show you how the way the diagram works is that you take the minimum number from here and you bring it here. So what you have here is a 1, and you, sorry, not the minimum, the maximum. So it's the maximum, because here the minimum and maximum is the same. And similarly, you take the maximum number here and you bring it here. So and I'll explain why. I mean, you might think like, that's so weird. Why do they put it on the opposite sides? And I'll try to explain that. But so far, do you understand everything that I've done? I mean, is it clear? Okay, so if you look out here, it states that every employee has to work for a department. An employee cannot work for more than one department. So if you drew this diagram in a kind of mapping way, it would look like this. So you would have, let's say this is E1, E2, E3, E4, okay. So these are all the employee entities, and I could have, let's say, so D. And if you want D1 and D2, I'm just going to say D. So this is the department entity. Represents a member of the department entity, and you have the employees out here. Now, if you draw so every employee must work for one department. Okay, so if you look at out here, so you have N employees connecting to a single department out here, right? So that's where this N comes from and the 1 comes from. So what it's really saying is N employees connect to a single department. And of course, you could have similarly, I mean, this is one department. If you wanted, I could have D1, D2. You could have E5, E6, and E7 connected to D2. So it's a N to 1 relationship. So we're really talking about relationships. It's a many to 1 relationship, or it's saying N is to 1 relationship. So that's why they have N and on this side and 1 on the other side. So I'm going to use both, because I think that just giving N and 1 doesn't tell you everything. I'm always going to put the minimum and the maximum next to each diagram, because otherwise when you're trying to convert, all the constraints don't map exactly. So any questions, because it's 10 o'clock and I'm going to stop. Does anyone have any questions?